Oh, I'm sorry. Did I break your concentration?
Somewhere between science and superstition.
We have such sights to show you.
Strange Eons. Welcome to Strange Eons Radio. That's Eric.
Hello.
That's Vanessa.
Hello.
I'm Kelly. We are sending you this broadcast from Crypticon Seattle in the year 2023. So that means you guys have to make some noise.
All right.
Wow.
Two
Holy
people
gosh.
can make a lot of noise. All right.
I think I know the answer. How many of you have never heard our podcast before?
Well, holy shit.
Well, we appreciate you coming here.
Yeah.
This is not our typical format. Our episodes are generally we pick a subgenre and then we kind of each bring a movie to that and riff on that. But every year here at Crypticon, we have ended up tackling a specific John Carpenter film. Last year was Big Trouble in Little China.
Absolutely.
Which is a little
Yay.
heartbreaking.
But so good.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
good to get to deep dive into it.
The year before that was The Thing.
Mm-hmm.
Just a little heartbreaking.
I feel like this is a theme when it comes to John Carpenter.
Poor John Carpenter.
Poor John Carpenter.
Both those films factor into what we are talking about today, which is Prince of Darkness from 1987.
Anyone in close proximity has the same dream.
What is it?
A secret that can no longer be kept. It started a month ago.
What started?
A change in the earth and the sky. His power.
There's a weird locking mechanism. Looks like it can only be opened from the inside.
A life form is growing out of prebiotic fluid. It's not winding down into disorder. It's self-organizing. It's becoming something. What?
Who has not seen this movie?
Oh my gosh. Like 50%
Wow,
of
really?
the audience.
Holy shit.
Leave right now and watch it, and when you come back, we will still be here.
We might spoil a few things for you. I
Just
apologize
a
in
few
advance, but still worth seeing. No matter what, we cannot encapsulate the madness of this film with words.
Right. Okay, so first I'm going to talk a little bit about what led up to the production of this film. As you may or may not remember, on our episode about The Thing, we talk about how that film was a box office bomb. And that bomb led to John Carpenter being removed from the film he was in pre-production on, which was Firestarter from the Stephen King novel. He was then instead given Christine as work for hire. He didn't have anything to do with the script on that. It was already developed for him, but it made some money. So they gave him another one, another work for hire. That was Starman, which is another box office success.
Woo.
You know, you forget how good Starman is.
It's so good.
We should do Starman next year.
Yeah, it makes me cry every time I watch it.
Yeah. So, with those successes, he is allowed to make one of his own films again, and that is Big Trouble in Little China. So he screws the pooch again. Big Trouble bombs, making $11 million box office against a $25 million budget. And at this time, Carpenter is approached by Canon Films and Mustafa Akkad and asked to write a script and direct a movie they are calling Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. He writes the script with Dennis Etchison, and they turn it in, and Akkad rejects it for being too cerebral.
No.
I don't know if you guys have ever read any Dennis Etchison. He's a wild British writer. That script actually had Jason turning into a Michael turning into a kaiju at a drive-in at the end of it.
Holy
Sounds awesome to me,
shit.
but
Too cerebral. Too
Yeah.
cerebral.
That's, yeah.
so in a fit of depression and anger, and quite honestly pissiness, because it's John Carpenter, he signs away all of his rights to the Halloween franchise and refuses to have anything to do with the films ever again.
Ever again.
Ever
that's
again.
where the Halloween franchise came to its end.
Died
well.
on that
No,
day.
wait.
So he's hurting now, but he's definitely not interested in working under the studio system anymore. Along comes Alive Productions, which is co-owned by a guy named Shep Gordon, who is the manager of, among other people, Alice Cooper.
Oh,
Mhm.
it's all adding up now.
So Carpenter and Alive Productions sign a 3-picture deal. The deal is supposed to be 3 films, $3 million budget each. That's not a lot of money, but the thing is that Carpenter gets complete creative control over these 3 movies. He can do whatever he wants. All he has to do is pitch them an idea. If they say yes, that's the movie he makes. Prince of Darkness is the first of these 3 films. So at this time, he's been getting interested in theoretical physics and atomic theory, and he's got this idea to intertwine the concepts of good and evil and matter and antimatter. So he starts developing a script. He's borrowed liberally from the old Quatermass films, which were from BBC and Hammer, which feature Bernard Quatermass, who is a scientist who continually finds himself facing the forces of supernatural evil, but they all turn out to be extraterrestrial in nature. There's a lot of these movies available. Some are Hammer films, some are BBC series or TV movies. They're not all great, but some of them are, and you can definitely see how they influenced a number of horror creators, including Stephen King, Brian Lumley, and John Carpenter for this film.
Did you see about Neil's reaction to his?
Yeah. Yeah. So this is the only reason I can find why Carpenter, who wrote the script for Prince of Darkness, he uses the pseudonym Martin Quatermass as his writer byline.
So weird. This is the only time he ever does this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you see that and you're like, Quatermass. I mean, come on, Quatermass. Like, that's so obviously like a fake name.
Yeah, and then in interviews, people were asking him about him, and he was acting like he was a real person and saying he was a drunk and that he had completely retired from screenwriting.
Oh, John. It's like he just gets high and bored. And he's just like, I know it's going to be great. When they interview me, I'm going to talk about this guy like he's a different dude. It's going to be so funny.
I kind of like whimsical John Carpenter, though, rather than the guy we've gotten.
Crotchety old John
Crotchety
Carpenter.
old angry
Who
loves
John
music,
Carpenter.
though.
Current John Carpenter is like such a gem, though, because he's also like, yeah, I play a lot of video games and watch basketball. Like, that's all he talks about. And it's brilliant. Like, it's just, he loves his life. So regardless of the past.
In the script, the characters that he's created have, they attend Neil University, which Eric was talking about. The Quatermass character was created by acclaimed UK television writer Nigel Neal. Coincidentally, Neil wrote a draft of Halloween 3 that was never used, and he is said to have really, really hated the movie Prince of Darkness.
Oh, God.
Kind of said, no, it seems like one of my movies, but no, I didn't make this one. I have
Right.
nothing to do with it.
So $3 million, not a lot of movie, even in 1986. And he decides to cash in a bunch of favors as far as his cast and crew. So it's produced by Larry J. Franco. Are you guys familiar at all with this guy?
No, I'm not.
You would have seen his name producing almost all of Carpenter's films. He was married to a woman named Jill Russell, who is the sister of Kurt Russell.
It's all adding up now.
Right. So Franco had produced Escape from New York, Starman, Big Trouble in Little China, and he was also Carpenter's assistant director on his Elvis film, The Fog, Escape from New York, The Thing, Christine, Starman, and Big Trouble in Little China. After this film, he goes on to assistant direct and produce They Live, and then he just skyrockets. He's producing films like Jurassic Park 3, Batman Begins, White House Down, and Eric's favorite movie, Jungle Cruise.
Oh, Jesus.
Wow.
Wee.
What
He
a
also
gem.
brings in some old actor friends, including Donald Pleasance from Halloween and Escape from New York, and Victor Wong and Dennis Dunn from Big Trouble in Little China, and then a smattering of TV and soap opera actors to round out his cast. And he is ready to make a movie, Eric.
Yep.
Thank you and good night.
Can
You
I
can see it now.
can I just quickly interject? Did you come across how John Carpenter first met Alice Cooper though?
Yes, I did.
Oh, are you going to talk about it?
Go ahead.
So apparently they first met at WrestleMania.
3.
And he actually shared with John Carpenter his desire to be in a horror film. Carpenter said, okay, but only if he could use Cooper's impaling gag, which I know Eric will talk about,
Okay.
from his onstage show. The bike that Cooper is impaled on was actually, or it uses to impale, it was his own personal prop. So,
Yep.
I didn't know that.
The Alice Cooper's manager also hated horror films. He produced like 7 or 8 of them or something like that. Most of them relatively successful, but he never watched a single one. So the movie you saw was lovingly shot over a long, luscious 30 days,
oh God.
which is very
Ugh.
short. It has a slightly different look than some of Carpenter's stuff. He usually uses anamorphic. That's not unusual, but he also shot wide-angle lens. And I had never noticed this before till I read it. But if you watch the edges real closely, sometimes you can just see that slight bowing that happens from wide-angle lenses. And he did that on purpose because he wanted to make it a little uncomfortable looking, but not in any kind of obvious way.
Interesting.
And you don't see it all the time, but when it shows up, you're like, oh shit. But this was the first film he did with the DP who did that, named Gary B. Kibble, who went on to do 7 other Carpenter films. So apparently they liked working together. And it's, for a $3 million film, it looks pretty good.
Yeah.
You know, it ends up looking very good. He used German Expressionism as one of his inspirations, which is why it's one of his slowest moving films. It's actually intentional. It's not that he lost the thread on the story. There's a reason that people stand around and things move slowly and all that. And was because of the films he was watching, going, I want to try something new. Complete creative control. Which of course didn't fly real well with 80s slasher movies because they're not exactly a languishing style of filmmaking. They say it's one of his most controlled films visually because of that, because he had an idea for every single shot. He wanted to do a certain thing. He wanted to be a certain way. And it is not, even in 30 days, he was able to pull off what he wanted to do on set while he was shooting. Even when they were shooting in a deserted hotel, the basement, where they used for the basement in the movie, which was so dilapidated that they had to sign waivers that if they got injured on set, they weren't going to sue the producers.
Oh my God.
But it was used for a lot of films there, but it's now like a parking lot or a Chase Bank or something. It's not there anymore. Alice, I was watching some of the special features on the Shout Factory disc, and you've got Alice Cooper there talking about his production and how they aged him. He matches.
Oh,
He's a not quite as pale, but he's like, wow, they aged him really, really well.
Oh my God.
The special effects people knew what they were doing. It was Robert Grasmere was one of the special effects the guy who turns into bugs in that one part. He was also actor in there. He had the beard, but he was during that scene with the bugs, when the lady kills him before he turns into bugs, she's stabbing him, and it was an older lady, so she's a great actor, no strength. So he grabs her wrist and stabs him. He says the scissors much harder than she was able to do. So it's like, yeah, it looked a little better that way, but she was really nice about it. He did go on to be the writer of the Baby Genius movies.
Oh no.
Really?
like 6 of them. But he also worked on Booksmart and Slat, The Bone Collector, a lot of Demolition Man. He's a big FX guy. He's done a lot of work. They were all, what makes the effects a little more interesting than some films, they were all done on camera. There was not done in the process of shooting. There wasn't a we're doing our special effects today
Mm.
or anything like that. It was done as any other scene was put up. So, which is surprisingly unusual, or that is a surprising way to do it because effects can blow your whole day, no matter what you're shooting. So to not worry about separating it out and just going for it, it worked out pretty well. Even though the big green container thing was insanely heavy and leaked constantly.
So it was full of liquid.
It was it was a practical.
Oh man,
practical.
So the moving green light was a practical effect
The
inside the container?
yeah.
I
they
just
set
figured
the
it
whole
was
thing up.
like that plastic sort of cellophane stuff, like on a swivel in there with
right.
a light up. I didn't think they had actual liquid in there. That's insane.
Probably not for all the shots,
Okay,
but because
alright.
it was leaking and it was so hard to move.
Yeah.
But for its main in the bottom of the hotel slot, it was usually an actual tank.
For 30 days between the bug wrangling and the
Well,
giant container,
I would
this is a
imagine they
lot.
took that up and set it, took that down, set it up as needed, I would hope.
Sure. No, I just mean like that's a lot of effects to try to squeeze in.
Yeah.
And did they also you're probably about to talk about this, but the
Okay.
mercury.
Mhm. Oh, yeah. Yeah, they use mercury for the mirror, the effects where they reach into the mirror, which is not the healthiest things to do. But where they got the mercury from is they drained the dolly wheels of its mercury,
What?
Yeah.
shot the scenes, and then put it back.
Incredible. Absolutely incredible. They were like, this was super like not okay to do, but it was fine. It worked. It looked great. It looks like a
Wow.
mirror that moves.
It ends up being quite good. What else was going on? Oh, the spoilers for those who haven't seen it. The end shot and the occasional dream shots were shot with film, and then he went back, played it back on a television set, and reshot it again. That's why it's got such a weird look. It wasn't just a generated effect in post or anything. It was, again, practical. So a lot of that's part of what makes it a really interesting film. I was not a fan of this film, really. It's not one of my favorites of his. And now I think it's amazing, partially because of the stuff, learning about what went on set and the fact that, okay, I wish this had been a huge success, or They Live had been a huge success, so he could continue on working with this company that was willing to give him money to do whatever the hell he wanted to. But he had a $3 million deal and got 2 out of it, so that is lost. And now we have Rob Zombie Halloween. So, how was it received when it came out, Vanessa?
Oh, funny you should ask. So, considering it was a $3 million budget and he kept bombing time and time again, Prince of Darkness was actually a success, coming in second place over its opening weekend and bringing in just over $14 million at the end of its 11-week run. Critically speaking, however, the results were a lot more mixed. John Carpenter mentions that the film died a swift death in theaters, but of course, like many of his other films, did find a life on video. But at the time, in his review for the Washington Post, Richard Harrington wrote, quote, "At one point, Pleasance vows that it's a secret that can no longer be kept. Here's another. The Prince of Darkness stinks. It too deserves to be shut up in a canister for 7 million years." End quote. Yeah.
Not a
There was
fan.
a lot of really negative reviews. Eleanor O'Sullivan of the Asbury Park Press echoed sentiments on a slightly rough note, saying self-consciously camp and self-important, but it's so dopey you can't hate it or help laughing. O'Sullivan also mocked various lines of dialogue and claimed the film would have put her to sleep if not for Carpenter's, quote, insistent, persistent, and loud score. Of course, people have really come around to it. In 2004, Jim Emerson wrote that Prince of Darkness was an undervalued horror film. He says, "What makes me goose pimply about Prince of Darkness is its goofy but ingenious central conceit and its truly surrealistic imagery, some of which could have been sprouted out of Buñuel and Dali's Un Chien Andalon." And of course, IO9.com's Cheryl Eddy acknowledges the film is riddled with gaping plot holes, But that doesn't stop it from depicting evil in one of the most repulsive and scary ways ever. It did go on to win a 1988 Saturn Award. I'm sorry, it was nominated for a Saturn Award for Best Music. It did win the Critics Award at the Arvois Fantastic Film Festival. And it's gone on to be a 4K release on Scream Factory, very readily available. Alice Cooper believes the film is ripe for a sequel, claiming he wants to see more than just the anti-God hand, but the whole thing. So.
And he won't need makeup to revise his role.
He can just roll on in. It'll be great.
Like Eric, I did not like this film. I think this is a film that really benefits from multiple viewings.
Yeah.
Really.
It's got really big ideas that I didn't really get until the last couple of times I watched it. Part of that, I think, is what you were talking about, Eric, with the way he was shooting things.
Yeah.
The discussion of Jesus being an extraterrestrial who was sent down to warn us about the anti-God, that just flew over my head all the time because of what a boring scene it is.
It is a very boring scene.
And it's surrounded by, I think it's, oh man, what's her name? Susan, radiologist, glasses.
The redhead?
Yeah.
Okay.
And having been possessed and then like appearing in the corridor and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so I was trying to get back to those scenes. I'm like, God, something is happening here. And then they drop some pretty interesting ideas in a scene that, I wanted to get past.
Yeah, it's funny because like watching it this time, I was writing down a lot of what was happening and forcing my brain to really engage with the content. And there are some incredible quotes being dropped from that script all the time. Pretty much every time Pleasance opens his mouth, some like horrifically disturbing but wonderful quote about religion versus science just like pops out. So there was just, I don't know, there's a lot in there, but you have to just keep your brain so focused to see it that it can really go past you.
Like I said before, the first few times I watched it, I'm like, well, this is just a weird, bad slasher film that separates people for no real reason. And watching going, no, that's not true. They actually set up very well why people are off on their own and doing things on their own. And it works in really well. I did enjoy the fact that of all the people involved, the priest is the only guy who shows up in a limousine every time you see him. It's like, all right. But
he's a really important priest.
Yes, apparently.
Well, I love that he feels kind of betrayed as he's starting to learn that, the church, the entire reason of the church was put on the earth to protect us from this evil. And then it grew so big and greedy that they lost sight of what they were doing.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really neat idea. I love, and when I say love, I hate the ants on the back of the guy's television set.
Oh my God. I didn't see that the first time. Because I remember there being a lot of ants, but when they pan back and they're just swarming out the back of that CRTV and you're like, oh.
You were probably triggered. You've had an ant problem lately?
I have had an ant problem lately, and it is not okay. And I wish they had said something at the start of the film, but that's all right. Never mind. Here we are.
Worms and ants ahead.
And cockroaches or those beetles. There's just a lot of bugs in this film.
Yeah, some kind of beetle.
Yeah.
The use of, we do another podcast where we're talking about Amityville a lot, so you see a lot of flies. I thought the idea of worms was much more interesting because I've seen swarms of flies.
Yeah.
And I've seen a few, worms, where I grew up, worms would get on the sidewalk all the time whenever it rained.
Yeah.
But the idea of worms going up and down a window was just weird.
And like weirdly going like smidging up and like just leaving their little worm trail behind. It was just like the clumps of the worms. Yeah, there's something so effective about this sort of cosmic horror that I don't think I had paid attention to previously.
Yeah.
And I just had no idea how much it is similar to things like Mouth of Madness and The Thing, right? Where when the Pleasance chops off the lady's arm and then it just grows back and then the head and then her new arm grabs the head and puts it back on and you're just like, what? Or the woman who's just like growing and growing like she's going to give birth and then reabsorbs it and like decays in real time. It's just like, what is happening?
Yeah, there's some really cool stuff. I also love the idea that the supernova, which was a real supernova, SN1987A, that's the thing that woke up the anti-god. It had reached Earth in 1987 and then awoken him.
Oh my!
And I thought, wow, that's a neat little touch that I
think
never
missed
caught.
that.
It happened in a really boring scene is the problem.
Maybe I like went and grabbed a chip at that moment or something.
Looking at your phone, playing.
I was only looking to make notes.
And for those of you who haven't seen the movie is there is this ancient sect of priests, the Order of Sleep,
Yeah.
and they communicate through their dreams. And the last one of them has died, and now the priest, he's just called the priest. But did you guys know that in the DVD subtitles, or not subtitles, what's the word I'm looking for?
Like closed captioning?
The closed captioning, he is referred to as Father Loomis.
Oh, jeez, Louise.
So I like that. But he's then he's shown this canister under this church that is supposedly aged 7 million years old. I'm like, wow, that's a lot.
Yeah. Yes.
And he brings in a astrophysicist and his team, or not his team,
It's
his
like
students
Yeah.
to come in.
Almost all students.
Yeah, and to come in and really let him know what he's dealing with. And what he's dealing with is the awakening of kind of a mixture of Satan, but also the Antichrist, because the Satan that's in the canister is the son of the anti-god in the mirror world. You know, that's what I'm saying. The ideas are so big in this that I think that it's really easy to gloss over the amount of backstory he put into this.
Yeah, and it's really tough because I think the rhythm of this film is extremely ill-paced because, like, partway through the second act, not at the first act, not at the beginning of the second act, but partway through the second act, they're like, here are 20 more characters. We're going to be in this location. We're going to maybe kind of tell you maybe their name and maybe what they do. Some of the characters look a little bit similar to each other. And you're just, it's definitely not just fodder. Death fodder. Don't worry about it. It's going to be okay. So there are these weird whipping between really fast and really slow. So I think if anything, the German expressionist influence, I feel like it was a little bit of a mistake. I wish he'd done a little bit more. And there's moments where it feels like Giallo, where there's like weird like gloves and in the night and somebody standing and coming out of the shadows where I'm like, this it feels like a better thing to be touchstoning.
That's actually what made me like it more. It was the understanding that he's intentionally slowing these things down, and the characters really don't matter.
Right.
The people in that church are conduits for what they're trying to bring out. And so we don't really get to know any of them real well. And we don't get to, you like some of them, you don't like some of them, but none of them are fully realized characters. They're very much we need this person to bring this part forward. We need this person to bring this part forward. And bringing them all together is how they'll bring Satan, or whatever you want to call it, out into the world. That's just what it felt like more. Because this time watching it, the boring scenes were the scenes I liked the most.
Yeah.
When they're talking the philosophy, all stuff going, holy shit, what is this? This is different. This is not an awesome, creepy scene of a masked guy hiding behind a hedge. This is weird, deep, bizarre philosophy. So I actually loved those speech moments, the teaching in the classroom at the beginning, and then when they first shown up and they're starting to argue a little bit and talk a little bit, it's going, whoa.
I have a question.
I don't think I was high when I watched it.
I have a question for both of you, which is the first time that you watched this movie, did you get the ending?
No.
Because I did not. And
Nope.
I almost didn't even get the ending this time until like some passing comment made me go, oh shit, that's what that means.
The way I interpret it, so throughout the movie, everybody who falls asleep starts dreaming the same dream. And it turns out what they're getting is from the future, from the year 1999, some people who are watching, the birth of the Antichrist coming out of the church they are in. And it's being televised, and the dream is telling them, we are sending you this in the form of a dream so that you can stop what you are seeing right now. And by the end, what they have done is actually made it come true by being there.
So the first time I watched this through, I thought it was like a sad romance. And I was like really upset because I was like, no, the mirror, their love, and like I never really thought past that. And at the end, when he like touches the mirror, I was like, oh, he misses her. And it didn't dawn on me that it's like, oh no, she's gonna be
giant clawed hand coming out.
well, no, I mean that I understood, but she's just in there with it. It didn't really. I didn't put together that her going in there results in what we see at the end of the film, which is the dream, which insinuates that maybe they actually made this entire thing happen through her sacrifice.
Right. Because she is now the figure that we see come out, and she's the vessel of the anti-god.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I love that.
I'm really sad though, because I really like that romance bit where I was like, it really stuck with me, and now I'm like, oh, fuck that, never mind.
Well, maybe you can convince your husband to grow a heroically uneven mustache.
Where did they find that guy? They just were like, you know what, we can't get, I don't know who, Tom Savini, like we can't get him, so here's some weird young tall guy with a
Are you talking about the guy
mustache.
from Simon and Simon? Yeah, that's where they got him. He's a big,
Simon
successful
and Simon.
TV character actor from the time. Although he didn't have a mustache in the show, I thought that was a poor choice. Like, Tom Selleck, yes. John Waters, sure. That guy though cannot pull off any kind of mustache, man. It's like, no.
He's got kind of a creepy, stalkery thing going at the beginning.
His hitting on her was so aggressive and weird. I'm like, if you think does that work for you in the past, sir? Is that what you're going
Well, it was
with
so
this?
confusing because the way they shot it, it made it look like, oh, she's his ex. And he's like keeping an eye on her, and he sees that she's off with a new guy. And like, there's some familiarity there. But then when he introduces himself, he's like, hey, yeah, I know you. And she's like, oh, yeah, I know you, because they're familiar with each other because of their science papers. And I'm like,
classmates.
So you were just like obsessing over this woman you hadn't met. You were just following her around and like being irritated that she was with people that were not you, but you'd never even met her.
She's pretty cute, Vanessa.
She's cute, but geez Louise, like
Well,
not okay, man.
this is men, we've got some real issues when it comes to approaching women sometimes.
I mean, if you have a masculine and feminine like hero of the film, you really got to make it like a little bit more likable, and their meet cute, not be just like disturbing.
Speaking of kind of assholes, Dennis Dunn is like the standout hero in Big Trouble, and he's so annoying and asshole-ish in this film that I was like, oh, I really wanted to like him.
I find him so much fun to watch in this film, though, because he's like the antithesis of so many other characters who are like, yeah, we got to dig deeper. He's like, I got a date this weekend and I have to be here. You guys suck. I'm like, yeah, Dennis, you go get it. Like,
but the way he's set up, in a regular horror film, he would be killed very early on. And the audience would go, yay!
No, I mean, and there's that moment where he's stuck in a closet, and on one end, we see that like these sort of transformed ladies are trying to get at him and break through the closet and eat him. You're just like, is he gonna not survive? And one of them bites him. And I was like, that's got to be it.
I was amused with that scene where they break through like almost immediately through the plywood, but don't mention that there's brick beyond it. And he goes, it'll take us a few hours. I'm like,
it's so weird.
It took you like 20 seconds. But then later on, they show them bit the bricks. I'm like, oh, okay, well, yeah, that'll take a while.
Yeah.
Well, also, he starts helping them really quick at the end. And I was like, if you had started this, an hour ago when they were doing it.
Right. I also had that thought. I was like, why weren't you like aggressively kicking in on your side just any of this period of time? Would have been very helpful.
This movie has several scenes of the kind of movie moments that I always find very bizarre. When somebody gets splashed with blood or whatever in their face, and they're like, ah! It's like, no, close your mouth. Be your first instinct. And this long stream of green urine-looking thing going in your mouth, I think, would lead to that even faster. But I guess he's got to possess them somehow, or it.
I think so. The problem that I still have with the film, and it is a pacing problem, but it's also a lack of creepiness, or it loses its creepiness.
Yeah.
Once the first two people are possessed, then it becomes a second half of the second act of them hunting down to the other people to possess them. And I don't think that's scary. That's kind of a zombie movie.
Yeah.
But when we first see Susan after she's been possessed, and she's just standing at the end of the hall,
Ooh.
or the people who are standing outside the church, who are just standing there, they're not going to move unless you try to leave. That is really scary, and I think that they could have. I think they could have pulled that off with having the people, instead of actively coming after Dennis Dunn's character in the closet or something like that. If they were just standing immediately, outside of it, I think that could have been much creepier. And that's, Eric, you just saw Quatermass in the Pit recently, right?
A little bit, about a year ago.
Did you recognize that was kind of what was going on there? Was at the end of that film, they've got, it's basically all of London.
Right.
And the few people who are not being affected, every time they go down an alleyway or something, there's just a group of people standing there.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
And I thought, if you had just amped up that, it could have been creepy. I wonder if that's Carpenter second guessing himself and saying, well, I got to put some action in this.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you, though. There was almost like this dueling horror element where you had this sort of zombie infectious devil anti-Christ thing hopping around, but at the same time, like the solar rays of the universe just finding its people, and having the homeless people just sort of stood there ready to like turn people into mangled carnage and then bugs.
Right.
Like that, I think the bug thing was much more effective to me. And anyone going into the alley just being just overtaken by a mob was a much more horrible fate than drowning in like somebody else's spit, which is not pleasant, but yeah.
I also love how, Eric, you were talking about the guy who turns into the bugs.
Yes.
I love when they see him outside in the middle of the night. He's just standing black as you hear him going, hello, hello.
Just in the parking lot chilling.
What is that the line? I have news for you, and you're not
going to
gonna
like it.
For you, yes. Yeah, he says that's the line everybody obviously uses whenever they meet him and talk about the movie. It's like, yep, thanks.
And then Dennis Dunn, after being kind of annoying and everything, he does have the best scene at the end where he makes it out of the church. He just looks both ways and runs down the street in a long shot. And I was like, yeah, that's what you would do. Get the hell out of here.
Well, it was funny too, because I was like, oh, I guess he's just going to go away. And then the next scene, he's like got the little like fireman's blanket over him. And obviously he went and got the cops and brought them.
Yeah, but I also don't get that then. So, well, I mean, I get it, but what was that conversation like? The cops are there. They're pulling bodies out of a church. And how do you explain what has just gone on over the last?
It's the 80s. It's LA. Any weird shit happens, I got all these homeless people and science gone wrong. You got to get down here. There's a lot of death.
Like you, Eric, I've really come around on this. This was just a film I didn't care for. Now I put it probably in his top 5 or 6 films.
Yeah.
It's really good. Vanessa, do you have any information on what happened after this as far as what he went on to?
Carpenter?
Yeah, because I know that his next film, because this was a success, and his second film is...
Was it... he went on to do They Live after this.
Right.
Yeah.
This was part of was it Alive Pictures?
Yeah, so it's the second film in that deal, and it does pretty well for him. Again, it's still a $3 million budget. When you watch that film and you realize he only had $3 million, that's pretty crazy.
That's insane.
And it makes something like $18 million or something, not a huge hit. And the reason then he doesn't take the third film is because he gets given a $60 million budget and does, I think,
Is it Christine?
Memoirs of an
Memoirs.
Invisible Man.
Oh, jeez.
Just his best work of all time.
So some directors need restrictions of some kind,
Yeah.
apparently.
I mean, I can't imagine John Carpenter and Chevy Chase trying
Oh,
to like get
jeez.
through a scene together. That just sounds like a level of hell I'm not interested in attending.
Oh, and that film had so many problems because it was supposed to be Eddie Murphy at first. When
Oh,
John
wow.
Carpenter signed on, Eddie Murphy was the star.
Oh.
So, yeah, all sorts of problems in that.
And I know they wouldn't let him do the soundtrack, right? They made him take that Barbara Streisand song. So, just beautiful all around.
What else can we talk about?
We see if anybody.
Any questions? Any comments?
Oh, God.
Oh, you.
Feel like this is kind of a remake of Assault on Precinct 13, but through sort of that horror lens that he was working in.
The question is, do we feel like this is a remake of Assault on Precinct 13 in a horror way?
It's a trapped space with things kind of, I don't know.
In the I think in as far as it's a trap space kind of movie, it sort of is. But the difference being the people outside aren't really trying to get in. They're just guarding the situation.
Just not letting them get out.
Yeah, it's not as much of a siege movie in the same way.
But that's a damn good movie, too.
Yeah. Ice cream. Sorry. Never forget.
Yes.
The movie was kind of confusing, and a lot of the threats are sort of mysterious and unknowable. And John Carpenter is famously opposed to that sort of thing in films. Like, he's a big critic of Val Lewton for like not showing the creature and for not being more straightforward. Do you think he does better with straightforward material, or do you think that there's any other examples where he's had a villain like this that's kind of obscure?
No, sure. Well, I go with one of my favorite films of his. It goes back and forth between The Thing and In the Mouth of Madness, which I know Wide Rise is not. A lot of people don't consider one of his best, but I love it, and that's part of the reason. It is that weird, unknowing sort of threat, as opposed. I mean, and The Thing has elements of that too. And I mean, it's more in your face, but it's not really known. So I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm thinking about straightforward enemies for John Carpenter, it's weird because maybe like Michael Myers is a little bit more of the straightforward, because otherwise it's like a possessed car who's in love with the character. We've got a bunch of undead lepers who are taking revenge on a town on a anniversary. Like when I start to think of the different kinds of protagonists or antagonists, I should say, I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah, it's an interesting way to look at his stuff.
Yeah.
I think he was also kind of forced into doing it that way with this smaller budget. He knew that he was going to have to count on making it more mysterious because he wasn't going to be able to show it.
We have a liquid and we have a hand.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Not the best looking hand, but it's all right. This is what we got.
Yeah, I do think that I love the idea of the dreams being messages from the future. I think that's a really neat idea. But you talking about the way it was shot and everything, that makes it the best part of the movie for me.
The dreams.
The dreams.
Oh,
Absolutely.
interesting.
Yeah, just because they're so unnerving.
It sticks with you. That moment and that sound, even though I don't really know what it sounds like, I feel like I know what it sounds like. And it just sticks around with you, and the lines, the way they're delivered. I think it's incredibly creepy and really strong. Part of what helps that movie now, the way I watch it, that ending is so strong.
Yeah.
And when an ending's really strong, the rest of the movie seems better.
Yeah.
Just the idea that if you hang out in this place long enough, everybody starts having the same dream, and it all starts kind of differently for everybody. It starts back here, and then you have a little more of the dream every time you fall asleep, and you start realizing, all of the sleepers, the order of the sleep, they were having this dream, thousands of years ago, which is also very creepy.
And nobody could get through to the end
Yeah.
and like just draw a quick sketch
Right.
of like what was coming out the doorway.
And there's that great scene where they've been trapped in there all night and everything. Sun rises, which is generally when everybody is able to escape.
Yeah.
And they're stuck in there, and this truck just goes by. And it's like, oh, that guy's going to work. He has no idea that the end of the world just drove past it. You know, I thought that was just a great scene.
Yeah, that was really good because I completely fell for it. I went for the, oh, how's it going to get better when the sun comes up? It's not. It's not at all.
Anything else? Anybody else have a comment? Or you, Steve, what? Yeah.
You look so panicked.
Well, okay. I'd like to hear your take on a specific effect because I saw this as a child and didn't really absorb most of the deeper things that were going on until I was much older and watched it. However, the one thing that stayed with me as a kid that even when I watch it now haunts my nightmares is basically the face melting sort of reveal and the, when she's sort of wide-eyed and screaming at the camera. I'm curious, what was the first, what age were you the first time you saw it, and did anything stick with you then?
I saw this in the theaters, and I was very disappointed.
Yeah, mine was a couple years later after it came out, probably, home video. But yeah, it was that, oh, wow, looks like John's kind of fading now. And then, of course, what I said earlier, obviously, I don't feel that's true anymore. But yeah, it was fine.
I mean, and yeah, I saw this for the first time just a couple years ago when I discovered John Carpenter and then went down a very deep, very fast rabbit hole, which I will not leave now. And I think something that really stuck with me was just that like imagery of that hand going through the mirror. Like there was just something so fascinating about that. And then when we go to the other side and the woman is sucked in and she's floating behind the mirror, reaching back out, and it gets dark because the priest breaks the mirror. Like those are the things that just like light me on fire with John Carpenter's work. Those little moments that he just seeds in there that just feel so compelling and so, I don't know, just so visually stunning.
Are you talking about the pregnant lady that then? Yeah, that is some messed up, creepy looking makeup. I thought that was really
the
unnerving.
grotesqueness of her laying there initially with her burn, and then slowly kind of getting more pregnant, and you're like, oh, she's gonna give birth to the Antichrist. Nope, it's gonna flatten back out, and she's just gonna become it, and like her skin is all gonna become so like patchy, and yeah, it was very visually insane, absolutely insane. But there's so many insane things happening all at once at that point in the film that it didn't stick out to me as much as some of those other things, but it's still like crazy.
I also remember thinking in the theater, so this would have been 87. I liked rock music, classic rock even back then. Did anybody else notice that her bruise was the shape of the Blue Oyster Cult symbol?
No.
So I thought that was a little weird.
Anybody else notice there was no Alice Cooper music throughout the film? I did.
Probably couldn't afford to license.
He's on the soundtrack.
There was a song when the guy was listening to the earphones.
That was the song he wrote for the movie, wasn't it? Yeah.
Then he takes it off. I think my favorite effect that is an actual effect that's not the dream thing is when we see the lady on the bed and her mouth and her eyes are wide open and the liquid is shooting upwards from there and it's just shooting up like a fire hose. I think that scene is really scary. And I think a lot of the scenes, even back then, I thought, much like The Fog, I think the first 30 minutes of The Fog are really eerie and creepy. And I think that about this film, too. So.
Every minute of The Fog is eerie and creepy and perfect.
Can you guess the first John Carpenter movie that Vanessa saw?
We had another question back there.
Of his pre-Escape from LA movies, do you think this is his most set piece centric? Like in terms of he sort of stops things to do a set piece as opposed to like The Thing is where it's part of the story the whole time as opposed to we're gonna stop the plot. Here's the plot. set piece plot.
I used to feel that way about it, but on this new watching, I don't as much anymore because I was so absorbed into the philosophy. So it felt more bizarrely flowing, and maybe because I'm insane and watch too much Tchaikovsky, weird ass Russian art films. But I, it's a very limited location that definitely moves from A to B as opposed to flowing as a solid story. I can see what you're saying with that, definitely.
Yeah, that's interesting that you mentioned that as a pre-Escape from LA because that's all that film is. Yeah, that's a good point. Anything else before we have to wrap up? Anything from you guys before we have to wrap up?
No, I was just so glad I got an opportunity to see this film again and dissect it with new vision, even though I'm sad it wasn't as romantic as I remember the first time.
This is one that I don't love the idea of remakes and reimaginings, but this is one I wouldn't mind seeing a current, somebody else tackle this.
Yeah,
It's impossible to tackle this without it being the goofiest shit because it's Alien Jesus. I just know you can't do Alien Jesus and have it be taken seriously.
All right, on that note, we are.
Yeah, we're Strange Eons Radio. You can find us every Thursday on every podcatcher.
Yep, they're all out there. YouTube us, whatever.
Right, and I think that is about it then for the show, right? We'll let everybody get to their next panel.
Yeah.
Okay, that was Eric. This is Vanessa. I'm Kelly. Thank you guys for coming. We'll see you next year, I'm sure.
Yeah.
All right.
Transportation and other considerations for Strange Eons Radio produced by Pan Am Airlines. When you think of traveling, think of Pan Am. You can't beat the experience. Guests of Strange Eons Radio stay at Econo Lodge Everett. It's an easy stop on the road, you know what we mean. Strange Eons Radio is recorded live in front of a studio audience. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving us a positive review on your favorite podcast app. Sit, Ubu, sit.
I feel like this is a theme when it comes to John Carpenter.